What's going on, guys? It's O-Rock here with Ming Tech Media, back at you with yet another video. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing what programming language you should use for your technical interviews. Now, if you're new to my channel, I make videos on how to level up as a software engineer, just general tutorials and tips and tricks, and how to become an elite engineer and make you in demand as an engineer. So if those things are of interest to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification button, so you'll be alerted when I do make content like this. So let's get into it. What programming language should you use for your technical interviews? Now, theoretically, you can use any language that you're comfortable with. I'd say stay in the parameters and in the realm of more C-style languages, more traditionally object-oriented languages. But if you are using an esoteric language like Kotlin or Scala or so, there's some tips for that. But number one, the thing you want to assess is what type of interview you're going for. If you're going for a domain or a technically specific sort of interview, like a front-end developer or front-end engineering or back-end engineering interview, you want to stick within like a certain set of languages. Like for front-end, obviously it's just JavaScript, but for back-end, like distributed system back-end or some other sort of back-end role, you want to use languages that are catered toward the technology that you're going to be using every day at work. So kind of just research the company, research the role, and try and see what it entails, as well as what technologies as well as languages you'll be using on a day-to-day. And if one of the languages that you're using is on that list, like let's say you're going in for a back-end role to distributed systems and Java is on that list, and continue using Java for your prep. Now let's say your language of choice isn't on that list or isn't something that you're familiar with, or maybe like, okay, let me just rephrase that. So let's say I'm applying for a role. I'm applying for like a back-end role, and I might be really adept at Golang, for instance. Never used Golang in my life, but just hypothetically speaking, I wanted to kind of pick a niche language just because everyone's situation is different, and there might be a developer out there that uses like some sort of language like that. I'd say stick with that language. You know, if you're really adept at it and you're, best at that language, that's the language that you've been using for like a few years, or, you're just really, really, really good at that language, I'd say stick with that language. If you've kind of been all over the place and you're equally good at certain languages or more than one language, I'd say pick the language that's the most easy to go and or easy to get up and running in. So let's just paint a scenario. Like let's say you're an engineer that kind of has used Java and Python professionally for about the same amount of time, maybe 2 years each, and you feel like you're equally adept in both languages. I'd say go with Python because it's a lot less verbose. It reads like English. It's a very great interview language. Like it's just simple. It still has all the tenets of object-oriented programming. You can, understand and learn concepts on Python. So it's best to just use Python if you're in that type of situation. Now, let's say you're using a more esoteric language like Ruby, Kotlin, or Scala, or one of these other things. You want to make sure that you're really, really good at those languages before you use it in an interview, because one of two things can happen. On the one end, you might not have, or the company that you're interviewing might not have engineers that are good at that language, so it's going to be hard to judge your code. Or on the other hand, they might have someone who's really, really technically adept and strong at that language, and they might be a lot more critical on you during the interview. So you might just, run into some problems with that. So I'd say be aware of that if you're going to use one of these esoteric languages. Also, if you're using a language like C, a lower level language, just be aware of it's kind of trickier to do certain things in C because of the lack of a data structure library. So doing things like a graph search might take a lot more code to write and a little bit more time to implement, as well as you also have to worry about memory management in C. So if you're not someone that likes to be meticulous about sort of the minutia of those type of things, I would say stay away from C. Again, the big four are C++, Java, JavaScript, and Python. So if you use one of those languages, you should be fine. use the one like I said before, that you're most comfortable with, so that you just don't run into problems, and so that the syntax of things doesn't get in your way, and you and your interviewer can talk about programming concepts and how you arrived at your answer without the code being a problem, without writing the code as a problem. Also, if you've come from a boot camp where they've used a language for, most of that instruction during your time at that boot camp, like they use JavaScript, just stick with JavaScript. It's a good language. There's a lot of job prospects. It has growth every year. It grows about a certain number of percent in terms of market share. About 67% of engineers say they use it on a day-to-day at work. So, there's not many engineers that I know personally that haven't used JavaScript in some sort of capacity on a day-to-day or semi-regularly. So JavaScript is another great language. If you just have a lot of time and you want to learn a new language, but you don't want to be bogged down by the verbosity or just all the little things that you have to remember to include in terms of packages and this and that and syntax, you don't want to worry about that stuff. I'd say Python is a great choice. It has a lot of uses beyond just interviewing. Python has a strong market share with about 47 or 48% of engineers reporting using it on a day-to-day basis. Python also can be used in machine learning, artificial intelligence, web scraping, scripting. There's so many things that even DevOps, there's so many things that Python is just applicable to. So it's not it's not just, you don't benefit just by learning it for an interview. Like if you learn Python, there's plenty of applications beyond an interview. Even for yourself, if you just want to start freelancing, if you get really, really good at Python, but that's another story. So Python is a great choice for many reasons and for many scenarios. So if you're just trying to learn something quick within the next 3 to 6 months and you're open to learning a new language, then Python is good. If you've already been using Python professionally and that's your best language, keep using it. If you just want something that, is quick and up and running, again, Python is a good choice. And like I said, you should use the language that you're most comfortable with. Try not to learn something new. If you're ready, like if you're using C# and you've been using C# for 2 years, C# is kind of ubiquitous. They'd find someone to at least understand and be able to judge you on C#. So just continue using C#. And before you go for your interview, irrespective of what language you use, you want to make sure you go through that language, go through all the libraries and all the, just core data structures and try and implement many algorithms in that language. I'd say try and do 100 of the algorithmic style problems in that language. So like the problems that you'd see on LeetCode or HackerRank or Code Wars, those sorts of problems, try and do 100 in your language of choice. That's going to be the best thing that you do. Practice.
We're talking about practice, man. How silly is that, man? We're talking about practice.
Yeah, I said it. Practice. Practice is what's going to set you apart from someone who just solved a few problems and, tried their luck in an interview versus someone who looks like they took time to actually prepare for every type of question they might encounter in an interview. So above all else, besides using what you're comfortable with, you have to practice. Practice, there's no substitute for it. And I'd say you practice, for about a couple of months at the very least, or if you have a month, just make your practice very targeted. You have to be very strategic about your practice because that's one of the biggest things beyond a language. The language is just, how you're expressing your answers and how you're expressing your ideas for how to solve these problems. So that is, that's important, but practice is going to set you apart no matter which language you use. So try and use this video to sort of assess your situation and pick the best language given your situation. Like I said before, everyone's situation is different. Every engineer is different. So you might just benefit from using a language that everyone else might not be using, but you have very strong technical skills in, or you might really be just using a language everyone is using already. And you just might need to just brush up on certain things. Like if you're using Java, you might just brush up on generics and collections and JDBC and a couple other things. So those are things to be aware of while, preparing for your technical interviews and trying to figure out what language to use. So that's all I have for today's video. So go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe if you found value in this video, and I'll keep on pumping out more content like this. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you were able to gain a lot of value from this video, and good luck on your interview process.